because if you look at this, the way they test people, they're using what's called a PCR test, a polymerase chain reaction test, and that's what they call a qualitative test, which means that you can say, well, there's something there which resembles this protein sequence. So they're saying, well, this particular new virus has a particular sequence of protein molecules in it, and we can test this person's saliva or whatever it is, or blood sample or whatever it is they have, and then if you can see that same protein sequence in that person, then they've got the virus, which proves that they've been infected with it. But that's a qualitative test, because you can't tell how much of the virus they've got. Have they had a heavy infection? Have they ingested it a lot? Or is it that what they're doing is they're just finding a protein sequence which is similar to the virus, but it's not really the same? It might be like 80% the same or 90% the same, but that doesn't mean it's the virus. It just means that that person has some tissue or some cells in their saliva or in the blood which match this alleged sequence that's allegedly in the virus. They haven't, in other words, they don't take your cells from your body with a swab or a blood test or whatever it is, and then actually put that under a microscope or an electron microscope and see the actual virus and say, yep, it's that particular shape, that's it. They're looking for what's called it's a surrogate test. So they're looking for an effect or a factor that's in the virus and claiming that that's it. So how infectious really is it? Well, again, if you argue that everyone has already got this protein sequence or something very close to it, then you could say that it's 100% infectious, because everyone's already got it from, and some people apparently can get it from previous flu jabs, because they'll put this protein or something very similar to it in a flu jab or another vaccination. So the people that test positive could have had it from an earlier vaccination. But let's take this idea that yes, you get a group of people together in close proximity, and you know, they cough, they sneeze, they whatever, and this virus spreads by the air droplets or whatever it is to other people's mouths and noses and so forth, and it gets into them. What would ideal conditions for that to happen be? Well, how about a cruise ship packed with hundreds of people in close proximity, with nobody allowed to leave, with air conditioning, with no real medical filtering, you know, going on for 2 weeks? What would that be like for an infectious environment, do you think? That'd be a pretty good way of getting a lot of people very poorly fairly quickly, wouldn't it? You know, if you actually look at the countries that have had lockdown based against those that haven't, then there's really not a lot of difference in the figures. I haven't got the figures to hand, but there are, you know, you can check these on various websites, and there's a very good sequence of videos by a chap called Andrew Mather, who's run a sequence of videos called Coronavirus Fact Not Fear, and he argues that looking analytically at the figures, the published figures, that there's no appreciable difference between the countries that have had lockdown and the countries that haven't had lockdown in terms of the number of cases. The number of cases that appear in the records are based on things like population density and the number of people tested. So in other words, as I said, because it appears that this is quite a common protein or whatever it is, or sequence they're testing for, the more people you test, the bigger the figures are going to be. So the number of cases that are reported are more likely to be a reflection on the number of people that have been tested than it is than actual infections.
And they want to push more tests out, aren't they, as well? You hear that a lot.
Yeah, because they can sell they sell in test kits. They make money off them. You know, they're not giving these out altruistically. They're selling them for like $20, $30, $50 a throw. You know, whatever if the figure is.